10 elaborated lessons from Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. But before we start, if you like more such content, you can like and subscribe this channel. Number 1. Financial success depends more on behavior than knowledge. Morgan Housel's central insight is that how you behave with money often matters more than how much you know about finance. He calls money management a soft skill. Success is not just following formulas but developing good habits and emotional discipline. For example, simply understanding investing math does little good if you panic sell during a market crash. Instead, managing impulses, like fear and greed, and maintaining patience are crucial. As the book notes, people with modest income can build wealth through consistent behavior, while smart but impulsive investors often fail. In short, personal finance is deeply psychological. Good spending, saving, and investing choices rely on mindset and self-control, not just IQ or book smarts. Number -2. Everyone sees money differently, no one's crazy. Housel reminds us that each person's financial decisions make sense in light of their unique experiences. He observes that our own money story, which may be only 0.000000001% of all history, shapes 80% of how we think the world works. A young person who lived through a market crash will react differently than someone raised during a bull run. Thus, when others make choices that seem odd, like hoarding cash in a boom or speculating wildly, they're not crazy, they're applying the mental models formed by their own life and luck. This helps explain why financial advice often fails. Different backgrounds, age, location, upbringing mean different reasonable actions. Housel advises empathy. Try to understand why others behave with money as they do, rather than judging them. Number 3. Accept luck and risk, the role of uncertainty. One of Housel's most important points is acknowledging that luck and risk shape almost every outcome in finance. No matter how hard you work, unseen forces can tilt results. He argues that acknowledging luck, being in the right time or place, and respecting risk, random setbacks, makes you more realistic. For instance, two equally skilled investors can see wildly different outcomes because of chance events, a startup boom or a crash. As Housel writes, we are one person in a game with 7 billion other people and infinite moving parts. So actions outside our control can matter more than our own efforts. His key lesson is humility. Don't assume all success is deserved or all failure is your fault. This means planning conservatively, praising broad patterns over individual anecdotes, and always leaving room for unexpected twists. Number 4. Define enough to avoid the comparison trap. Modern society pushes us to constantly chase more wealth, but Housel warns that this can be a trap. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalposts to stop moving. In practice, this means determining what enough money or status looks like for you, rather than measuring yourself against ever greater peers. The book notes that capitalism generates both wealth and envy, and that happiness equals results, expectations. If you raise your expectations every time you achieve something, you'll never feel content. For example, buying a bigger house might feel good briefly, but then your new neighbor's houses become the new benchmark and you want even more. Housel suggests consciously deciding when you have enough, whether that's a certain savings target, lifestyle, or career goal, to avoid endless comparison. This protects not just your finances but also your relationships and well-being, since many things are never worth risking for additional money. Number 5. Harness compounding. Time is your greatest asset. A powerful lesson in the book is that time is the secret ingredient of wealth. Housel uses Warren Buffett as a real-world example. Of Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth, $81.5 billion was earned after age 65. In other words, Buffett's success owes less to genius and more to compound growth over decades. The book emphasizes that even modest returns, sustained over many years, produce extraordinary outcomes. Time is the most powerful force in investing. For an ordinary person, this means starting early and being patient. Saving and investing in your 20s or 30s, then leaving that money alone for 40+ years, will likely yield far more than trying to time the market or chase high returns. The core insight is that you don't need to be a wizard at picking stocks, you need to be persistent and hold for the long run, letting compounding work in your favor. Number 6. Build wealth quietly, save and live below your means. Housel drives home that wealth is often invisible, it's money you don't spend. He bluntly states that spending to impress others is the fastest way to have less money. In fact, he says the only way to be truly wealthy is simply to not spend what you have. In practice, this means living on much less than you earn. A higher income helps only up to a point. Beyond that, your enough is set by your ego, not reality. Instead of chasing a bigger salary to keep up with peers, Housel argues it's more effective to raise your savings rate, i.e., increase humility and curb lifestyle inflation. This savings rate, not income, largely determines how fast you build net worth. For example, two people might both earn $100,000, but one saves 20% while the other saves 5%. Over time, the higher saver will be far wealthier. This mindset, valuing frugality and flexibility, gives you optionality. If you have cash on hand, you can seize opportunities or weather emergencies. Number 7. Use money for freedom, control your time. Housel highlights that the greatest dividend of wealth is control over your time. In other words, beyond fancy cars or vacations, money's ultimate value is letting you choose how to spend each day. He says the highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. This could mean retiring early, reducing work hours, or simply avoiding unpleasant jobs. Psychological studies back this up. People who feel in control of their lives are measurably happier than those with more money but less free time. Real-life examples include people who prioritize modest incomes in exchange for flexible schedules or remote work. Housel reminds us that owning a home debt-free, as he did, provided him massive peace of mind, even though a mortgage would have been the rational financial move. The lesson is to define wealth by freedom, not stuff. Investments and savings should aim to buy you choices, not consumer goods. Number 8. Plan for the unpredictable, margin of safety. Money isn't just about chasing gains, it's also about surviving setbacks. Housel stresses building a margin of safety, extra cushions, into your plans. The most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan, he writes. This means keeping enough emergency cash or insurance so a job loss, medical bill, or market crash doesn't derail you. For example, one chapter quotes Benjamin Graham, the purpose of a margin of safety in investing is to make detailed forecasts unnecessary. In simple terms, assume things will go wrong occasionally. Avoid high leverage, debt, because it can turn ordinary risks into ruin. By acknowledging uncertainty, you make less brittle decisions, you give yourself room to breathe if investments dip 20% or if you decide to pivot careers. In behavioral terms, this teaches calmness. Knowing you can handle surprises helps you stay invested or keep your cool when others panic. This resilience mindset, survival as the book calls it, is what separates those who stay wealthy from those who crash and burn. Not hyper-rational. Housel points out that striving for perfectly rational financial behavior can be unrealistic. Instead, he advises being mostly reasonable, recognizing we're human with emotions. For example, it might be rational to invest 100% in stocks because they historically beat bonds, but it might not be reasonable if you can't sleep at night worrying about volatility. A reasonable approach might be a diversified portfolio you can stick with through bad times. The same goes for goals. It may be rational to minimize leisure to earn more, but reasonable to carve out some free time for sanity. In short, he argues that what matters is sticking to good decisions for decades, not optimizing every percent. By aiming for reasonable choices, like steady savings, steady investments, and a comfortable lifestyle, you are more likely to maintain them long-term. This practical attitude, balancing ambition with emotional comfort, helps people avoid blowing up their plans. As Housel notes, aiming for reasonable consistency often yields better results than striving for an idealized but stressful rational strategy. Number 10. Embrace humility, stories, biases, and the unknown. Finally, The Psychology of Money warns that the future is fundamentally unpredictable and our minds are prone to bias. We tend to believe coherent stories about money, but those narratives can mislead us. Housel reminds readers that the correct lesson to learn from surprises is that the world is surprising. In practice, this means avoiding overconfidence. Just because the housing market boomed for years didn't mean it could never crash, as happened in 2008. The book also points out that stories are by far the most powerful force in the economy. We fill gaps in our knowledge with neat narratives, which makes us overestimate how sure we are about the future. For instance, a young lawyer's expensive purchases might fool someone into thinking he's universally wealthy, when really his expensive lifestyle is tied to specific career goals others don't share. The lesson is to be humble, focus on what you can control, saving rate, time horizon, behavior, and be skeptical of hype or doomsaying. Good financial plans assume many things will go wrong and